In our earlier sessions, we were trying to focus on how to set up the computer, how to set up, download the required softwares like the database, MySQL database. Then it comes with its workbench as well. Now the installer, MySQL installer, will help you to get all the required things on that front. And the sideline, like MySQL database, basically the workbench needs .NET 4.0 as well. So that I think I did not mention explicitly, but installer might be, if you don't have that, installer might be throwing an error. So you might have installed that already. And Eclipse, primarily we are using SVN for code management and Maven for project building. So now I have done some changes into the code, and let me run this code once, how it looks like. Let me see if it is still running already. Okay, yeah, it's running already. So what I can do is, yes, if you are on mic, please go off. So there is a register page. It looks like this. I have simple data, okay, and say I already have user one already. So say suppose Harinath, something of that sort. So the registration is successful. So now what I do is that maybe there is I go to another browser. I mean, actually ideally it should work in the same browser, but um, it's not a cleaner one. Come on, what happened to this? Oh, okay, got it. No, I disabled the security, so that's the reason. Okay. So I'll go back. I go back and did some change somewhere. And about this, there was Spring Security is a module that I used. Maybe I'll just add.
Yeah, I'm unable to watch your screen.
You are unable to watch me. How about you, Rishi?
Your screen.
So today's font is little bit lesser than the earlier days.
Font.
Yeah.
No, basically, like there's a different computer.
Okay.
I could actually do the required change. This is little better.
Yeah, it's better.
Yeah. So can you see my screen, right? Shirisha, how about you? You still
I'm
can't?
not seeing, sir. Right.
No, you should see it. There may be some other window in the bottom. There will be some other window in the bottom. You will see, Shirisha. You have to see, because other guy is seeing, like, so there is no problem with the meeting. Okay, so this is a simple registration page right now. That actually is a functional, so means that it is actually the moment you click say save, it actually goes and sits into the database. see that data went into this table. So I could even check on this. It says it's logged in. It says the username is nothing but the email ID, so it shows. So this is the basic thing that I was working on. So I enabled Spring Security module as well. Now all the pages come as if there is some kind of standard layout. Okay, still it is not that exciting as on the front end part. So that we need to really work and fix on that. Well, let me actually explain the code once. The various aspects of it as I listed down. There are few things that you must be knowing. There is a Spring framework. There is Hibernate for database connectivity. Okay, it is called ORM, Object Relational Mapping tool. Okay, Object Relational Mapping. ORM stands for. Okay, this is a ORM tool. Spring MVC framework is MVC stands for Model View Controller. So this is similar to Struts or any other web framework. Okay, Struts historically Struts framework is very popular in the Java community, but now given that the kind of popularity that Spring framework is getting and the attention that is attracting from the Java community and the number of people who are working and committing into the Spring framework, so Spring MVC is a very excellent choice for any new project. Okay, but still people it's always a choice. When it comes to Java, the good thing with Java is that developers have choice. It's often it is the preference of the developers, whereas in case of Microsoft, you never need to think of a choice because you always have a single IDE, mostly Visual Studio, and that takes care of your requirements, and you cannot think in any different way. And there is a tiles for tiles framework is for layout. For layout, basically like you want to have your page split into, if you look at this page and this page, what you see common is that there is a header always, header, footer, that is common. The body part, this one, and whereas here this content changes, but otherwise rest of them look same, but that means that you are creating some kind of branding, and a standard layout by looking at something, if I look at say suppose Times of India newspaper, by just looking at the font I can figure out, okay, this is Times of India, like that. Okay, so there must be some standard always maintained across your application on the user interface side. So there is a header here, this is called header, and then there is a body, and then I have a footer. So here it says home or powered by CareerScale. So I just gave link for CareerScale. In this this one goes to CareerScale, whereas the other one goes to the home page itself. Okay, so the idea is actually like let me go back, it seems it's taking time. Okay, so idea is that we learn whatever is at present. Okay, and here I took some extra strain. Earlier also I designed for one application. I mean OCMS itself I have done earlier using a framework called AppFuse, and also I used AppFuse to provide some architecture or kind of initial stuff for a company. Okay, so now as a consultant basically, so now actually like for me the earlier code was having too much of stuff where certain things I might not really require at all, or I may require later. So right now whatever I have the code base, it uses almost all the latest frameworks. You name Spring framework, we use the Spring latest version. Okay, like that. And at the same time I do not have anything extra that you have a question, okay, why is that I have this? Why is that I have this? You know, you will never have to have a question of that sort. Okay, so there is a plan. Now you see here in the headers, you see small icon, you know, here Firefox is there, then there is one right side arrow. Can you see that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that actually is called favorite icon. Okay, every website, you know, for Gmail you see here, for Gmail you see this is the their favorite icon. Okay, and this is our fav icon. And how I did this actually, like, you know, for CareerScale, and I just place that, you know, maybe once we have a proper branding, then we will replace that. So I just created, you know, using some website, I created that particular thing. Where is it? You will find here, you know, this is the fav icon .ico. This is icon file, that icon file. Okay, so that's I mean, at the application side, I mean, just a small information on that. Okay, and then what I have is, like, you know, let me start from the scratch. Okay, so first I have PALM, the Maven. Maven basically, like, is a conventional, I mean, it goes by convention. It goes by convention. So I have all the, like, you know, here goes, you know, some of the properties at the application level, in the sense, what are the versions of various things that I'm using. Java version 1.6. So it is going to compile with the compatibility of 1.6. Spring Framework 3.2.0. Spring Security 3.1.3. Okay, Aspect J is one certain thing that, you know, we will, maybe as you learn Spring Framework, you will come across. There is basically here, it's because of the dependency. Spring depends on it to provide AOP, aspect oriented programming. It uses it. And SL4J is a logging stuff, and this I am not sure what this is. Then we are here is the tiles version. Okay, and then repositories, primarily, like, you download the first initial jars from these locations, and, you know, the various dependencies are mentioned here. This I discussed earlier as well, but I'm just, you know, showing you through the file. So we have all the required stuff towards our whatever development we need to do. And there is this Tomcat plugin. So I don't need to have any downloaded install, downloaded Tomcat explicitly. Okay. Yeah, I mean, regarding the Java version, you know, it is about the compatibility. Okay, you may use JDK 7, but still you can compile with, you know, JDK 1.6 support. It's about, you know, not just JDK, but the compilation level. So that what, like, you know, what matters. Okay, so now this is about the Maven file. Okay, you can look at, you know, if you look at, you know, overview here, you can actually see some interesting stuff. The dependencies, if I mean, what are the things that we are depending on, you know, these are the things. Each dependency, now here it is listed separately. Okay, then there is a dependency hierarchy. Okay, so resolve dependencies, see here, though we have few items only mentioned, but there are lot of them that actually we are working on, we are depending on, lot of them that we are working on. So this actually, like, you get this window just by clicking on the pom.xml. Just click on the pom.xml, you have different tabs here. Overview, dependencies, dependency hierarchy, effective POM. Effective POM means that, you know, it will be like, you know, if essentially, like, you know, my pom.xml, how many lines that I'm actually looking at. There must be something. Where did I say? There must be some place where it there will be some place where it shows the line numbers. Okay, and content types, editor, text editor, show line number. Okay, yep, let's look at this. Okay, now here this is 258 lines. Okay, but the effective POM if I look at it, it is 480 lines. Effective means that what, like it will be the final one, because if spring depends on something else. Okay, now here, see here, it actually showing the paths and all, but you don't need to worry about the effective palm. What you need to worry is, like as long as you understand what is here, that is pretty much fine. So now let me go back to our code base. So this is the pom.xml. I am talking about. The project object model is what it is called. It's the heart of your Maven. Maven depends on pom.xml in order to work with your project. So in terms of SRC, if Maven structure is that the code is always structured. You look at any Maven project, the structure is that you have always SRC. SRC has main and test. Just discard this as SQL one, that because I just added for our benefit, not the standard Maven structure. So this is only for, like our we want to store database file somewhere, so that's the reason I have this file. Now there is a test folder and there is a main folder. Essentially, like if you look at Java folder, main Java and here test. So within the main and within the test folder, in the both the places, you are going to find same package structure, very similar structure. Okay, so where you have your package hierarchy, Java code is going to be there in the Java folder, plus you have resources. Folder means that you store your configuration files, any other project related artifacts. This is a standard Maven structure. This is a very standard Maven structure. Okay, and in case of web applications, if you are not building any web applications, then you will not have this web app folder. But if you are building a web application, the standard structure is that you put all your web related stuff into web app folder. Meaning this is it will be like this. Okay, so if you have web app folder will have your images, styles, or JavaScript file, JSP files, and your if you are web folder as well. It is like root of your web application. If you have a Tomcat and suppose some application is deployed to Tomcat, then you look at that exploded Tomcat folder, then it looks very similar to this. So within the resources, I have placed the CSS, styles, style sheet, then images, whatever images that we are using right now, and scripts essentially for the JavaScript files. Okay, and then within the CSS I have and again images. That is primarily because of the style sheet that I am using, that is internally referring relative path. So in order to not to break the functionality, I could have fixed it by changing the CSS and placing the images into the regular folder. Instead of doing that, I actually I kept the images folder and few images within that as required by the style sheet. Then images I discussed about images, and then within the script we are heavily dependent. We are going to heavily use jQuery. We have jQuery libraries here, and then application related, I just have one simple file, register.js, for validating the validation script of this thing. So this folder structure is generally you use something called, there is something called archetype of the Maven. So there is a mechanism to create Maven projects, and when you create it, they do create this structure. You can actually create a Maven archetype yourself by writing some Maven plugin kind of stuff, but that is out of the scope of this present thing. There is no magic here. There is a template kind of thing for Maven, so you just use the template, give your project name, and the type of project, it is going to create the structure required for the project. But that is, if you don't understand what it means, it is nothing to worry, because we are going to use only this project, only this structure for this project, and you will understand things slowly. And within the WebINF folder, I have something called I-18. I-18 means that I-18 is nothing but there is some spelling, internationalization. Okay, internationalization means that I want to actually like build a website which actually like works as per the locale of the user. Say suppose someone is from Sweden, so I want to show text in Swedish, or maybe someone is from France, I want to show everything in French. So the messages and all, you should not be hard coding the messages. So this is to support that particular thing. But right now again we don't need to really worry, because we only support English. And when you have to support other languages, there will be the messages underscore say for like you will have for each language you'll have a different file. And when you're creating those literals, you actually specify you have to provide text for all the languages that you support. Then there is tiles. Okay, tiles is a framework. I was talking about header, footer, right? Header, footer, body. So this is about that actually. So basically like you have something called template.jsp, and if you look at this particular template.jsp, what you have is that this looks like this pretty much looks like a HTML file or a JSP file. So here I'm using tag libraries. So one action item for you guys is understanding tag libraries. Okay, JSP tag libraries. So this is you need to understand tag libraries, and then only you like there's an interesting thing that you must be doing. I have one of my video on tag libraries. You can actually, maybe you can search on YouTube or Google and watch that video. But here, coming back to this particular thing, the tag libraries, what are the tag libraries I'm going to use? I'm using some of them. Actually I'm not really using all of them, and I just was use some of them, just lifted this thing from my previous project. So maybe that if you don't find them to be, some of them to be useful, maybe we can skip. And then this is the root of your HTML document. Any document that you are going to write in the application is going to have the same thing. And now some of the metadata in the head, okay, and then the JavaScript files are, and then they see here the favorite icon. This is how you link. By specifying this, you are going to make your web page contain, okay, the contain with this particular icon, and then the script libraries, okay. So then you have your body, and interesting thing here is that you have to notice that there is something called tiles insert attribute name header, tiles insert attribute body, tiles insert attribute footer. Okay, here the interesting thing that I'm going to actually like is that when I write some page, okay, let me show you the registration JSP page. So in the registration JSP page, I'm not going to have any header element here. I don't have any head directly, the tag libraries related stuff, and then I jump into actual HTML code to generate the sign up form. See here, to generate the sign up form. But how is that I'm getting? When I am actually like looking at this, I'm actually like you see here sign up form is there, and in the code I have sign up form, and there is nothing much on top of it. There is no HTML code on such as it is only the tag libraries and the div declarations, so that you have here, but you don't have any header related stuff. Similarly, the bottom of this thing contains it's actually like it's only going to contain the whatever is getting rendered here within this selected area. Left side sign up process is there, right? That is actually coming here. But then overall if I have to sum it up, only the body part is actually coming from your individual JSP page. Okay, so that actually means that I'm going to relate this with that tile stuff. Okay, means that I'm actually going to have, see, my page is now, just assume that my page is divided into three parts: header, body and footer. for any page that I'm actually going to request, I say that the header and footer is going to be constant, right? Only the body content is going to change. So that's actually like we use tiles framework in this way, that you in order to render a constant layout for your application, we use tiles framework. So where is it? Let's look at this. Okay, so here tiles definition, it says by default, look at this, by default the template is template.jsp is going to be used. Header, you have your hard coding, I always use header.jsp. So, and I always use footer.jsp. Within the footer.jsp, whatever I have, see here, home and powered by CareerScale. I mentioned other thing, but it is not coming up there because of the styles issue. Okay, so this probably I need to get it off. And then header, if I look at the header, see here, you have the logo, CareerScale logo, and then there are a link like home, case, support, about us, tell a friend. This is the stuff that is there in the header. So this is actually specified. This is actually specified in the tiles.xml, and this is actually very minimal stuff. Very minimal stuff that I'm going to use. This actually is saying like I'm going to use for header and footer as mentioned here. Okay, but then how about the individual pages? For each individual page, which one I am going to fill it in? So there comes the view.xml. There is one here. All the views, all the files are specified. The JSP files are specified into views folder. Okay, so within the view, at the root level, you have something called views.xml. Views.xml. Okay, so here I specify, if someone says someone is going to register, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to say, okay, you are going to access register. So I actually like immediately, like when I type the URL, when I type this URL, what really happens is that control first goes to the register related. I'm going to talk about that. So but because this situation needs, I'm going to tell you immediately what it is. So registration controller, there is something called registration controller. Now here I'll explain this particular structure in detail, but let's look at this first quickly. So I'm requesting a get method. I'm requesting a get method because when I request here, this is going to be, when I just type the URL, it is a get request to the server. Okay, so what the get request, what is the relative URL? Register. That means that look at this, relative URL register. So for this URL, when I type a get request, when I hit a get request, this is going to hit this method. Okay, this is going to hit this method. That is the reason every time I do a request, and I could actually pretty much see here, see into the get method, I could see that into the get method printed on the server console. Why that is getting printed? The reason is that that I am writing here system.out.println. Okay, and then it says we written a string here, string register / register. Okay, this is called view. Okay, so view means that which JSP or like which kind of presentation we are going to use. So that is mentioned here. When this control, when you return this Spring MVC, what it does is that it is going to look for this, okay, in the views, and it is configured to use tiles. So it will go to the views.xml, and here I have something called you are defining same thing as you have seen in the, not the template but the tiles.xml. okay, it is same as tiles.xml. Come on, yeah, tiles.xml, same as tiles.xml. Here you have definition, a simple definition, and here I'm going to, for each of this thing, you need to bear with it, it is little slow. So here again I have definition, and this definition extends default, means that in the default that is mentioned in the tiles.xml, where you are saying header, footer, that is fixed, right? You are specifying which header need to be used, which footer need to be used and all. Okay, so and in this case say for registration, for each of this presentation, whatever presentation is required, we need to define how it is going to used. Okay, so for this definition, when the user hits register, what I'm going to say is that extend that from the default layout that I mentioned in the tiles.xml default definition, and for me header and footer is fine. So what I say is that put attribute name equal to body, in the body place put this web enough views, and this curly bracket one, this actually means that the parameter that is given to that definition. When you are executing it, see in the registration controller, what I am doing is register/register, right? So this value will come to us here. This value will come to us here. So here it's going to be replaced. So then that means that webinf/views/register/register.jsp. Do you have that file there? Views, register and register.jsp. So in the body part alone, this gets replaced. That is a placeholder, that is a variable kind of thing that gets replaced. This curly bracket, whatever you have this selected one here, so that is actually like a variable. So here this value gets filled with whatever you have mentioned in the Java code, So that is actually like in this particular scenario, from registration controller, I am returning a string called register/register, and because this maps to now this is actually about this register URL, right? From this URL, for this URL, when you are hitting it, for this URL, the server side logic is mentioned here. Okay, all the Java code logic is mentioned here, and then the presentation part, in the sense what should be shown to the user, okay, is defined by your tiles configuration, that is views.xml. And here I'm actually saying that first you use the same default whatever default definition is there for this view, but only change that I want is body. For body, use this webinf views / this variable, okay, this placeholder, and this value gets replaced with the path that is given by the registration controller.java. Okay, there it is given as register/register. So it is going to look at this folder within the views, register, okay, / and register. This is the one, register.jsp, and the navigator. Okay, look at this. This file gets replaced, for every request that is going to happen. And then similarly, say once I register. So once I register, say here, say suppose I click sign up. Okay, so now there is something called registration successful. Now this is a registered page. I have another JSP, registered.jsp, and here I don't have much stuff. Okay, one moment. Okay, I actually even don't need this side stuff, right? But I just kept that part. Okay, but if I can pretty much probably remove this part. Okay, but otherwise I just have registration successful, and then say please log in with your email ID and password to continue with this site. I just mentioned that text, but then interestingly I am getting the header, I am getting the footer, everything looks, it looks inline, whatever you actually like, get used to it. So that's something, and for every new page, every new controller that you need to create, or every new request that, path you define for the user. Okay, what you need to do is that you need to actually create a different page. So here one I have for register, one I have home, one I have default. Some of them were created by default, when I use some arch type to create this particular project, and primarily like whatever I added now is basically like registered or JSP and registered. Okay, so this is in the presentation. Any specific questions on this presentation part? See, the registered, this is actually placeholder, means that for the given request. Okay, there is nothing like one page taking one, see here, and when I hit a URL, whatever value that comes from the, it's always, here mostly you will see always 1. The reason primarily because in case of successful registration, I'm going to say register/registered. This value gets and sits into unsuccessful registration. Okay. So for now, just assuming that this is a placeholder, the value comes and sits here, that should be sufficient. And then any other questions, guys?
No, till now it's okay.
Okay, fine. So what I'll say that this is the tiles part. Okay, the dependencies are getting these things. You don't need to really strain because I got everything. I took all the pain putting these things together and making a working web application end to end. So so what you really need to know is that look around these files, understand what this is and all that. It is the at that level, like that is what I'm expecting at the immediate level, immediate step. Okay, so my computer is slow. I really don't know why my computer is slow, but it is slow. Okay, so I have views that XML that we understood, and then we looked at template, footer, and interestingly web.xml in this case it's pretty much empty. Otherwise, if you are working with because we are working with Spring latest version, and we don't need to really have any stuff defined here. I'm going to explain how this particular thing is wrapped up. We use lot of annotations. Okay, with the latest Java version, you have lot of annotations, and if you have noticed here, it says for every path, see here, request mapping value is /register. So that means that for the particular path, when the user is going to use this particular path, this method will be invoked. So what really happens with annotations approach is that during your application loading, I don't like this kind of things. If something is not needed, you don't need to use it. Okay, so during your deployment, when application is coming up, it will actually read these annotations and do that required work. It will do the mapping. Otherwise, it will be hard coded in the web.xml. Now you don't need to do that. Rather, every class as you develop, you can write this particular thing. You just specify this annotations. Annotations are nothing but this is like you will have request mapping is here. Okay, look at this. It is a Spring particular class. So this is this a class? Yeah, this is an interface basically. So Spring actually, like as you are loading and it is going to handle, you will have handlers for these annotations, and they will take care of actually like delivering the same impact as you configure them in the web.xml. So you don't like find any servlets explicitly, and honestly this code, if you look at it, it looks like pretty much a regular Java class. It doesn't look like I mean a servlet or servlet related stuff. It doesn't extend anything. It is a plain Java class. You can look at this as well. See here, it is a plain Java class, but only annotation you have is that controller. You're saying that this is a type of controller. That means that controller internally, like Spring framework, is going to deliver us the kind of impact that you will have or with a servlet. One moment. Now, so this is how basically like as the application gets loaded, initially like all these annotations are resolved, and accordingly it is going to be the paths will be mapped in the sense, here in this case, look at this. By default, you don't type anything. You just type the URL. It is going to come to this controller. It is going to come to this particular method basically. and here I'm saying return home/index. Can you explain what this means?
Yeah, it will be moving to the where there is a home folder in that index. Have been mentioned in that request.get method.
Look at this. Home
Yeah.
within the view.
Yeah, this one.
Yeah, within the views home
Yeah.
within the home and index.jsp. This is what it is going to render. Okay. So and that will be based on actually, like if you look at index. Okay, if I don't specify anything, I think it's going to default to the index dot. It's not mentioned here. So okay, the star one actually means that anything that is not defined. If I need any explicit settings, I can use this. Otherwise, it is going to for login also. I mean for home page also, same thing is going to be applied. The header footer will come. Okay. So I think I'm able to give you a decent understanding about how the tiles or layout stuff is working. Can I assume this particular thing?
Yeah.
Okay. And how about you, Shirisha and Kavita?
Yes, sir, I understood.
Okay. So
Sir,
yes, sir. Please.
in the bottom, till the line 16 to 21, these are all things how we getting the view pages. I got that. There we just the dot register index. Okay, returning from the method. Okay.
Now, which file you are talking about? I've opened views.xml. You are talking about something else.
Just you have just before view.xml you have seen shown me normal Java class. There was okay, user controller.
This one?
Yeah, that's the return use line number 33.
Yeah.
And it is mapped in view.xml again.
Yes, it is mapped in the view.xml, but that actually like explicitly, I mean there is nothing, no explicit definition is given there. So by default it will go to it will anything else that is not configured explicitly, it is going to use this one. I mean essentially it is going to mean the same thing.
One little question.
Sorry?
Okay, one little question.
I think even I can actually remove these things because this is going to address the everything. Okay, so by default it will be working as
Miss that represent for the all miss.
yeah, star means if it doesn't find anything, it is going to default to this one. So actually I added this.
Accommodate everything.
I added these things. I think I really don't need this stuff. I even pretty much I can try that out. I think it is not even required because it is going to handle anyway. Unless I have a very specific requirement where I have a different header, different footer kind of requirements, I can use, if I have any such requirement, I can use a custom approach, but otherwise this is going to be sufficient. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So then let me go to other parts of the code. So the config folder, I think I mentioned this, this so web app initialization, this is where this is going to be first. Web app initializer is a Spring class. It extends an interface called web application initializer. Okay, so this is a class that is a custom class basically, like, but that advantage with this class is that when your web application is coming up, okay, on startup this method will be executed. On startup this method is going to be executed. Okay, so here what I'm saying is that context.set config location. So config location means I'm giving the package name for where I have my other files. So if I look at it within the Java in CareerScale apps OCMS config. So I have my configuration file set into this particular path, and then this particular 2 lines, they mean that there is a Spring security module. To enable Spring security, I have these things. Okay, so this is where you are actually configuring the Spring MVC. Spring, I mean, otherwise, if you actually read older books of Spring MVC, then you have something called dispatcher servlet and all. Here, you don't do anything explicitly. Rather, I mean, in the web.xml, rather, see here, you do like this. You configure a dispatcher servlet here. You say that, any request, you are defining a servlet. This is the servlet, okay? This is the servlet that does a lot of magic. So you are configuring a servlet that takes any request that comes to the application. This servlet is going to hit. I mean, it is going to take the request. For any request, generally you have, see, generally what happens is that you have, for each URL you configure a different servlet, right? But in this case, it is a single servlet that is going to take all the requests. It is the front controller. You call this as a front controller design pattern, meaning it is like, it is like the main gate, anything that has to come to this application has to come to the dispatcher servlet. And this dispatcher servlet will read other configuration files or, the Spring annotations and all, it will decide. Based on that, it will have enough information on which class it has to forward this request to. Okay, you were saying something, Rishi?
Yeah, means for the first request, this will be the entering point of our request.
Any request, not first request. Any request will come to the dispatcher servlet. Okay, and if with the older versions of Spring MVC, this is something that you really configure in the web.xml. You say that you configure a dispatcher servlet, and you say that the location, the path for that will be servlet mapping will be to / your root of the application. Okay, and then
means
user now we are not doing it, sir. Web.xml with the older versions of Spring MVC framework, you explicitly define that in the web.xml. Here you don't define that. You directly like this particular class is going to take care of everything. Such as if you are talking about only OCMS project, even if you don't understand what this means, it's pretty much fine because it is already in place. Application is running with Spring MVC. As long as you know how to add your additional code to build functionality, it is fine. Okay, so this is on the basic initialization, and then comes there is something called web MVC config. Look at this. So here, actually, like I talked to you about tiles. This is where actually tiles stuff is configured. Say that the messages. I mean, by default, it is going to take all the messages from this location. Still, we have not explicitly used too much of it. So, and then tiles says tiles.xml here and views.xml and resources within this resources folder like this. So these are configured for this web application. So how I mean, it's going to be like tiles is going to be used. Views, like, where is it? See here, add resources handler. So this is going to actually like this is like configuring those things. Okay, especially for the Spring MVC. This is a configuration about the Spring MVC. And then security config is about how Spring security need to be used. Spring security basically it actually like I mean, before that you must have some idea about what is a security for a application. There are two things. Okay, one is okay, so basically like for any application what you have is there is something called authentication, there is something called authorization. Okay, authentication means that it is like getting a username and password, but basically you are authenticated user, that is fine. But for application what happens is that you have something called based on the role. Say if I am administrator, I can do lot of things. If I am a regular user, I can do very few things. Or if I am some manager or something like that, I can do certain things. So authentication is like, validating a user, whether he is a user, into the system or not. Okay. And then after that, authorization is something whether this user can do this or not. Yes, he is an authenticated user, but what he can do, what are the things that he can do in the system. So that comes under authorization. Generally, you need to build those things into the application. Okay. So here, Spring Security is a module from Spring. Basically, I think it was SEG framework earlier. So some guys developed this framework, and then it was sounding good, getting popularity. So then when he merged that into the Spring thing. Okay. Then we call that as a Spring Security. Now it is a module within the Spring framework. So now I am actually using Spring Security module for this application to manage the authentication and authorization. Okay. So we just started using it. So as we build functionality, we need to tune the Spring Security configurations. And for now, if again, it's a little bit, it's pretty much fine if you don't understand about it too much. Okay. So this is basically like Spring Security configuration. Let us look at the persistence config.java. Here, don't worry about these particular things. Okay, this red marks here. Basically, like the code gets compiled, and you see here what basically here I am configuring, or what is configured here is what database you are going to connect it, what database you are going to be connected. Okay, and how you are going to deal with this connection. So data source configuration, I am configuring the driver and all that here. Look at this. Where am I reading? I am reading all this data from, it is not nowhere I mentioned my complete URL or anything, right? So, but these values will be coming to me. These values will be coming to me from a file called persistence properties. Okay. So see here, data source.url, data source.username, data source.password, and the dialect, and then what are other things that I want to do. Say suppose show SQL is now true. That means that whenever there is an SQL statement executed, you will see that in the log file or in the console that what query is getting executed, insert into or select from that. Okay. So and then I mentioned this one, Hibernate HBM to ddl.auto equal to create. I'll explain what this means. Basically, like I have within the DAO, earlier these files were in a different folder. Now I moved into this particular thing, DAO and model. I mentioned that there are Java classes. There are Java classes. Okay, these are mapped with Hibernate, meaning each Java bean, Java class is associated with a particular table in the database. And how it is mapped, look at this. Entity means that this is related to the database, and what table I am referring to? Case underscore activity. What database? OCMS. And then how am I actually treating all the individual properties? ID means that primary key. Okay, and I say generated value. Here little bit of knowledge about MySQL workbench and how the database data gets used or something like that. That is important. Okay, basically identity means that that column gets auto generated. The column gets auto generated. Each if you look at Oracle database, there is something called sequences. Okay, you define a sequence and use the sequence to generate next number. Whereas in MySQL and similarly SQL Server from Microsoft, what you have is something like auto increment, meaning if you say that this is an auto increment column, so next time you are going to insert some row into the table, what it is going to do is that for this column you don't need to give value, because database will generate and put the value there. If you have customer or employee ID 1, next employee ID 2, 2, 3, 4, all these numbers will be generated by the database. Okay, and which column of the table? There is a column called ID in the table. Okay, say now there are similarly, like there are other tables, they are actually mapping foreign key tables kind of thing. This is mapped to the foreign key stuff. Maybe we'll see that after some time. But other columns, let us look at this, and you see that only for the get attribute of these properties. Here I have these properties, and then I have any annotation. You look at this, I have for @column. For @column only I have this annotation. This annotation actually means that I'm mapping, it says @column name equal to description. I'm saying this particular property in this Java class is directly mapped to exactly represent the value that is in the database. Okay, so this is how these beans are actually like generated. There are multiple ways, now actually like initially I designed the database, okay, and from the database tables using some plugin Hibernate tools, it's called Hibernate tools for Eclipse. So using Hibernate tools I generated the Java code. Now at present in this project, the way database gets generated is that because of it works in a other way. In sense, earlier when I created these files a year back, I created from the database, use some plugin to generate this. But now I have the Java code with me. I don't have any SQL mentioned anywhere to create the database tables. Okay, so but it is going to use these tables. I am saying in the persistence.xml, or here now if I look at these properties, say create. Okay, so it is going to create the tables from the Java beans. Okay, so now you have all the tables here. I mean, when you run your application first time, it is going to create the tables. And if you really want to see what is there, in a standard approach, you can click this particular file, MWP file, and that actually opens up your workbench. Okay, so it's actually like, this is how it looks like. So I can pretty much maybe zoom it a little bit. Look at this. These are the tables and the relationships and all. So if you have, there's a reason, I was asking for MySQL workbench to be there in the developer mission. The reason is that we design, you can write, manually you can write the queries, but basically like, I have designed the database earlier, meaning it is not the final one, such as, as we implement the functionality, we need to do changes here, but this is a good starting point. So I have designed the database, and suppose if I want to execute it in MySQL workbench, if I want to execute it, what I can do is, from database I have this diagram, and from the database I say forward engineer, okay, and say next, and say next. So now it's asked for the password. So look at this. See here, it is going to create the required queries for me. Okay, DDL queries, and I click next and all. It is going to create the tables in the database. Okay, this is how the workbench looks like. And as we are discussing about, that's something called auto increment. Look at this. The way you have here, there's something called auto increment column. AI stands for auto increment. Okay, PK stands for, I double click on the table and it opens up. Okay, and here, so for the primary key, it shows this lock. There's a symbol. Okay, says that this is a primary key. So this is a primary key, means not null. Not null means you cannot have null value, so mandatorily you need to insert data into it. Name, it's not a primary key but not null. Q means unique constraint. Okay, whether the value should be unique or not. Bin means binary, and UN means unsigned data type, and this is what fill up with zeros. For now you don't, I start discussing about it, it becomes too big, so I'll just skip that particular part. But at high level, this is how it is going to be. And on the foreign case, we have the foreign case defined. Say suppose I look at this, double click on this. Okay, login master. I clicked on the login master, and where are those? Come on. Somehow it's not populating properly. Case master, columns, yeah, I see the columns, indexes, I see these things. Foreign keys, yeah, I see here. Okay, look at the case master table. Okay, I click on the case master table. So you see that there are some foreign keys mapped here. Foreign key means, let us look at this. Okay, for this particular table, there is something called case master status ID, and where this is mapping to? This is mapping to another table called case status master. Where is this case? First in this table, master. Okay, case status ID. Okay, this column will be mapping to another table called case status master. And what are that? Look at this. My table means case master table has a column called case status ID, and this is mapped to other tables ID. There is a column called ID, and it is mapped to that. So like this. See here, this is a help category ID. It is mapped to help category is a master table, and case master subtype ID, and it is mapped to case subtype. There is a table called case subtype, and that has this column. So creating and all is easy. You just click here and and you type the table here and select the columns. Okay, so but I'm not going to do that. So this is on the database front. Okay, don't save. And when I come back here, all the database stuff is mentioned into this particular, all the beans right now, they are there into this folder. Okay, and how it is configured is that persistent and config, it actually it is going to look into, see here, entity manager factory dot set package to scan, says in.careerscale.apps.ocms.davo.model. So that means that it is actually nicely going to scan all the Java files from this package and do the whatever is required for that. In the sense, if you enable that Hibernate bus, you create, do auto create. That means that it is going to look at each of these things and say, okay, this is the table definition and what are the columns, how you are planning for these columns and all. Based on this, it is going to create the database. And going forward, you are going to use this particular thing, the same entities to query database or to insert data or something like that. It is going to be straightforward thing once you are used to it. Okay, you need to get familiar with this particular thing. And then basically this is how it looks like. And how do we really write queries? Okay, and look at this, how simple it is to write query. This is an Hibernate wrapper. Okay, so but basically you don't see too much of stuff because it looks very this entity java x.persistent.entity manager. So it doesn't you don't feel that you are using something of Hibernate, because there is something called Java Persistence API, JPA. So Hibernate adheres to that particular thing, and it is transparently here. You don't find Hibernate such as here, but it is going to be the backend guy who is working on it. Okay, so let's look at this. To save a particular element to the database, see here, what I'm going to do is, in this case, there is something called login master. Okay, so I have a login master bean. You create a Java bean and then say entity manager.persist. Entity manager.persist means it is going to persist to the database. It is going to persist this data to database. Means it's going to do write an insert query with this bean. Whatever data you have, say that login master is maps to this particular table. There is a table called login master, and it has these properties, and how these properties are associated. Okay, which column they belong to. So there is a mapping mentioned in the Java file itself. So here it becomes easy, that you just say entity manager.persist and give the object, and you don't need to really care about the kind of SQL that you write for it. It's going to be cool at the outset. Okay, most of the cases pretty much unless you have serious performance requirement and you are joining multiple tables kind of thing, then otherwise this approach is the coolest one, because you don't really strain about writing queries and filling values into it or kind of thing. It is a pure object oriented approach. Okay, and otherwise suppose you want to write some query, okay, and execute it. So here I have a query defined. Let me show you here. Okay, says this is actually JPA format. We can look at it later in detail later. So select login from login master login where login dot email ID equal to this. Okay, wherever this value is there, like this is the query, that is basically like this is a query that is defined here. Okay, named query. But what is this particular variable? Login find by user. It is actually a string. Just a string. Okay, string constant. Public static final string find by username and just a variable name. Okay, so this is a value. So I'm saying that I'm actually naming this query. There is a query that I'm writing and giving a name for it. And what is the name? This is the name. This is the actual value. Okay, login master dot find by username. That's the query. So here what I'm doing is I'm saying that entity manager dot create login create named query. So that particular whatever query you see there is going to sit here, and I'm mapping that to a table called login master and setting the parameter. It needs the value, right? Email ID. So and then you say dot get single result. So it is going to get the first result. It is going to get the first result. If you are going to get this data, meaning you are going to get, because I know that the email ID is going to be unique in the system. The username is going to be unique. That means that if the user is found, so you can say that, okay, this user is valid. I mean, actually, I think I should be doing, we should do, you should check for the password as well in order to make sure that it is working fine. Okay, so but here this is a Spring framework, Spring doing it, so that maybe probably will do some comparison out there. So, but this is how you actually do at the outset. This is how you are going to write your code. Here, just persist. Say that persist, and it is going to save the data into the database. Okay, and this is on the database front. Okay, we need to do lot of stuff. If you want to get data, you write a query something similar to that and try to get the data, and saving is simple. And then comes, first you have, when it comes to the database, you have the model, means that it's actually like one-to-one mapping with the database tables. And then you have DAO. You need to write, for different purpose, you need to write different user repository classes. Here user repository, but for case you may have to write case repository, a different file. Okay, and these things, if you look at it, @persistent, these things I am not sure whether you are able to get it, but they are again annotations, and they primarily, the stuff, they happen, many things happen automatically. So it's going to, but we will actually, I think we should, maybe we will have subsequent sessions and all, and you will have more questions, and then we will work out from there. Let us look at this user service. Okay, so what I have is from the database level. If you look at bottom of this pyramid, what you have is the tables in the database. Okay, but then on top of it, I have my Java classes exactly mapping the same thing, and on top of it, I have my DAO class or your user repository, which actually knows how to talk to the underlying layer, how to save the data to the database and all that. Okay, and that is on the bottom of it. Okay, but on top of it, I have some service. I call this as a service. Service layer is going to have information about your what you call business logic. Okay, here you write your business logic. So actually I think this this is used by Spring Security, so probably I must be creating something else for a registration, but for now I have mentioned the code here itself, the register, and I wrote this particular thing. See here, register user, and I'm just sending some object here. So user object, it is not the database object. There is an object called user that is having the properties that you have within this registration form. Okay, so from this form I created, there is a user object created. I'll explain how that is being created, and then this method is called, okay, register user, and give within those with this bin. Okay, and here I'm creating a login master object and calling user reported dot registered user. That means that it is going to go to this particular method. Here it is going to here, and here says persist. Okay, so service is the layer. Service is the layer where you have your business logic written. Okay, as you keep writing code, you are going to actually add up lot of services. Each service is having some logic, and that logic, if that requires database access, it will go and talk to the database using the DAO layer. Suppose if you have to do something to the user, then you have here user repository. Okay, so this is, and first let me repeat this. Okay, this is entire application architecture, and I'm actually trying to explain from the bottom. Okay, first you have the database. On top of it, your Hibernate or like ORM beans. Okay, model beans, one-to-one map with database tables, and on top of it you have your DAO class. Say suppose in this case user repository, and you are going to have lot of them, and on top of it you are going to have a service layer which has all the service layer which has the business logic around it. Okay, and maybe that is service layer, service class is going to have multiple business methods, maybe talking to multiple database tables and all. Okay, so that's the underlying layer. Okay, and when it comes to the presentation, or the web part of it, I'm going to have controllers. This now we are touch basing it. Okay, I was talking about it when we were discussing tiles, and now this is little different one. Say your controllers are going to have basically like very much Java code. It looks like a pretty much regular Java code, and there is a lot of some magic that happens here. Let us look at only this method, or like let us look at these two methods. Okay, you only have two methods here. Other methods are like just dummy methods here. So first thing is, when a user is going to request something, and also like one more thing, like just don't worry about this validator part. Okay, for now I am not done that part of it. Okay, so I need to just validate. There is some changes with the older versions to this version. So there is a get request. Now I explained that when there is a slash register that happens here, so it's going to actually like and the get method, when this particular call is going to happen, this method will be invoked. And here what I'm saying is that if you notice, there is something I'm saying is model attribute value equal to user, and say user bean. Model attribute value equal to user, and let me open the JSP file. Please pay attention here. Let me open the JSP file. See here, I'm saying farm. This is a tag library. So here I'm saying command name. And actually like I think command name is not going to help us here, but model attribute. See here, model attribute. Here I have model attribute, and is my other thing. Yep, here I'm saying model attribute here as well. Okay, let me close others and open this. So I'm saying that for this farm, I'm saying model attribute here, and I'm saying model attribute here. That means that there is a one-to-one mapping between the farm and this particular Java bean. What I have in the user bean, I have email ID, password, first name, last name, date of birth. And then in the JSP, if I go here, the farm elements, let us look at this. Okay, so here farm input value, input path is email ID. That means that it is going to map with email ID property of this particular bean, user bean. Okay, so then the styles and all we looked at earlier, and let us look at this. Here input path, this is a different, the tag library syntax looks little different, but at the end it is going to boil down to same input type equal to text, or input type equal to password, something like that. Okay, but just to have a one-to-one mapping. Okay, one-to-one mapping. So here I have password field, and similarly I have other properties, last name, date of birth. Okay, and then submit button, and they actually map one-to-one here. Okay, so when I do submit this form, say suppose user 3 and click submit, what really happens is that it comes to the post method. See here, it comes to the post method, and there is a Java bean, Spring MVC, that creates your bean. You don't need to read from the request and all. Otherwise, what you do, HTTP request, HTTP servlet request, request.get param, get parameter, you give the property name, email ID, something like that, right? Here, You don't need to do all that. What really happens is that you have some web form, whatever data you have within the form is nicely going to come, and Spring MVC is going to take all the values from there and create this Java bean. So if you just say, I removed that code when I was trying to print, system.out.println user dot get email ID, get first name, get last name. You will nicely get those values back here. You nicely get these values back here. In the sense, the values are populated into the bean. So what I'm doing is, now let us relate it back. I was talking about the user service. Now here I'm calling user service method register user, and it is going here. And here what I'm doing is, let me this is what I explained. Okay, so new login master, and get this login. There's a using login constructor. I'm going to create that object and send that to user repository. And here what is happening? Here I just say entity manager that persist. Now with these simple lines of code, if you look at for this particular thing alone, for the registration alone, this one and this one here, this is anyway you cannot get rid of this. You need to have your HTML defined, so there is no shortcut for it. Okay, but otherwise on the server side, right now there are no server side validations. I mean, there are validations indeed on the client side. Okay, if I just say this, it is going to throw me an error. And similarly, see here, let us look at this. It says, you see the errors nicely. It looks like, kind of, better, and because you see them in a proper way, right? But on the server side, suppose if the browser is not working properly, browser is not running JavaScript, what is going to happen is that request will anyway go to the server. If browser has any problem running in JavaScript, here jQuery is used. So if there is any problem with the script and all, it is possible that the request may go to the server. And in that case, you should be doing a server side validations as well. One round of validations in the server side that is pending right now. I need to find out. I need to actually put in a better way of doing it. Okay. And in case of, if there is a registered user, what I'm going to get is that in case of if a user is registered already, email it is already used, so I'm going to get a exception, unique constant exception from the database, and I'm wrapping that into application exception. If I look at this, here you look at this, look at this. I'm getting some persistence exception, and I'm just taking from there. I'm wrapping that into some other exception. So here I'm doing that. I'm adding to errors, and when I do that, ideally it must actually show up that error. Okay, right now there is a problem, a little bit of problem. It should be a small problem. Once you with 1 or 2 lines of fix, that should be working. What will happen is it will show on the top saying that whatever error message I want to show, saying that email ID is in use, please use some other email ID. Okay, so that message will be shown. So that's on the other part. So this is, at the high level, I have explained you that, the many aspects of the application, a lot of aspects around this. Okay. So next task for you is go through the code. It is pretty much available in the SVN and the Google code. So go through the code and, get yourself ready, embrace, that whatever technologies, get familiar with the technologies, and I suggested the books on various topics already. So it is actually not going to be that easy. It is going to be very difficult one. And if you are actually working on this project in a company where they are paying you hefty amount, you need to work day and night on it in order to catch hold of these technologies. So I'll stop it for today.